Maneco 64 here, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This conversation or interview is taking place on Friday, May 29th, 2020. I've got the pleasure of speaking with Mike from Rethinking the Dollar. Last time we spoke was April 2nd, so almost two months ago. Mike is near Detroit in the US. I'm in London in the UK, so I thought it would be good for us to talk about the economies on both sides of the pond, so that Mike's viewers know a little more what's going on here in the UK and Europe, and my viewers all around the world, and especially in the UK, know what's going on in the US. Welcome, Mike.
Mario, how you doing, my friend? It's always good to connect with you. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And you said as well that the political situation, just on the pre-interview or having a quick chat, political situation seems to be heating up. I know you have your elections early November, but yeah, that's one thing I noticed as well. Yesterday, I made a video about economics, about what I'm seeing. And I said, I don't see America being made great again. And I said, I know a lot of you are not going to be happy about my comments, but all I see is a lot of debt being created, a lot of money being printed, and the usual suspects, the Wall Street bankers and big corporations benefiting the most from all this bailout that we've had. Do you want to follow on from that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think you touched on it, America not being great. And so the question is, what initially was great? I'm not sure exactly what the measuring standard was for great, other than the fact that to this point, we have the reserve currency. So if that made us great and it's all been consumption driven and debt inspired, then so be it. But I think those times, the good times, what we would consider normal, are long past now. And so, being 90 days into the monetary restructuring, as I will like to call it, is it's very alarming on my end here. And so outside of the monetary issues and economic issues we're having, it's the political things that really concern me, because, as I mentioned beforehand, it's the tit for tat stuff that's starting to escalate. And so, unfortunately, you factor in, there's a lot of pent up energy from people being locked down for the last 90 days. And then there being an attempt from the right to kind of open things up, but yet there's resistance from the left on doing that. And so it's a tug of war back and forth as to what's best for our country, while all along, none of the options being presented will actually benefit anybody other than, as you mentioned, Wall Street. And so I think this disguising and using this current health situation as a cover-up for what was already underway, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know about it. And it's one of the things that really concerns me, because my primary responsibility is for Main Street, to help people realize that, we're witnessing literally the fuse burning on both ends. And the middle is the end of the civilization we've known. So now it's just a matter of how fast will the wicks burn before there's a major explosion, or God forbid, some type of, global event outside of what we've been introduced to. So it's very alarming. But my concerns is that we may not actually see a election this November 3rd because of all this back and forth between politicians right now. So very alarming, not to mention all the other stuff they're going to try to throw at us as well. So.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot more division in the US than here, I would say. I've found that the scary thing about here is that the general public in general, they've bought into this health crisis. I think they could start everything again tomorrow and say, oh, it's over, don't worry, but people would still be scared. They'd still be keeping apart from each other. I don't like to use that term, social distance.
I know,
but apart from each other. And also, I mean, we heard yesterday that here they're going to start allowing other shops to open, shops that are not considered essential, on June 15th. Yeah. So if you go back, the lockdown started, I think, March 23rd here. It's almost 3 months. A lot of small businesses are not going to be able to reopen. And also small or medium-sized businesses, mom-and-pop businesses, they're going to suffer. And even though we've seen that here and in the US, the central banks and the governments, they've offered programs like loans. Why are you going to take loans if you have no certainty what's going to happen? We read about central bankers and economists. They keep saying we can't really make forecasts because it's too uncertain.
Right.
So for businesses, it's going to be even worse. So is that happening in the U.S. as well? And what would you say? Is it the lockdown? Is it more in terms of how the state is, like, for example, New York and California are blue states, so they're really playing it up, the lockdown.
Right. Same here in Michigan. Yeah, same here in Michigan. So I'm in the great state of Michigan, and we have a governor that's been very vocal and downright political in her responses, regardless of the so-called data she's been given. So and I'm not sure a lot of people may not be aware, but this past weekend, Memorial Day weekend, in the northern region of Michigan, it's more of it's the kind of like the wine valley for the most part. It's real beautiful up there, and majority of the people tend to go north due to just having lots of activities up there. And so she broke down the reopening of our state into 6 phases, and apparently the 6th phase, if we were to get to that point, which we couldn't, would be basically the old normal. And so right now we're 2, 3, second or third phase, but yet also she broken our state up into regions. And so it looks like she's going to announce regions week by week based upon results of the weeks before. And so region 8 and 6 happen to be this very same area where she happens to own real estate in. And so apparently she was up this weekend with her family, and I heard through social media that I guess one of her children is graduating, and they try to have an event and gathering and all things like that. But before that even came about, I already knew that there was an agenda behind that, because there's not much commerce up there outside of what could happen down here in the metropolitan area. And the fact that she chose to do that lets me know that it's more than just the concern of people's health, if that is a major scare for her, outside of her wanting to literally try to take a jab at Donald Trump. And so, because they've been going back and forth over the last couple of months, so small businesses, in my opinion, are ultimately not going to be able to recover. And so, as you mentioned, who would want to take out a loan when you're not even guaranteed to be able to open up at full capacity? Nevertheless, whatever service or product you sold more than likely now has been provided by the major retail box stores, to where, and on top of that, at the cost that you can't really afford to offer. So more than likely doors are going to close. But I think that's all a part of the initial plan. And the plan is to minimize control and to ultimately weed out the middle class, whatever that's worth. So the small businesses, for how we're looking at it now, will not reopen, and it will not look the same. The land front from here on out will not be anything of what we're used to, and that's problematic because employment. And so we have 40 million people now, and as I mentioned before, 90 days into it, and all the indicators are lagging behind. So it's no way of really assessing the damage to what's been done. But majority of those jobs will no longer be there. So how do you address that? And that's where the monetary fiscal policy, even more of it will be dealt out. So small businesses are done, unfortunately, depending on what sector and service you're offering. So it's a sad, very sad opportunity or lack of opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, I saw Larry Kudlow. I saw a clip on YouTube. He gave a short interview to Fox News, and he said that we haven't seen the peak of unemployment yet.
No.
The other thing he said that is kind of worrying fiscally is that they're looking to cut taxes. I'm not pro-tax. I'm against big government. But if you're going to have a budget deficit, which is running around 20% of GDP now, how can you afford to cut taxes? And if you're going to have because small and mid-sized businesses, they create a lot of jobs. And if these businesses are going to be disappearing, there's going to be a lot of people unemployed. There's going to be a lot of not enough tax revenue. And it's the same thing here. I've got the paper here, the Telegraph, which is a mainstream paper.
Yeah.
And it says here, millions face ruin if Lifeline is halted for self-employed. So there you go. And they have a scheme here that is for 3 months. So self-employed people like me, you get up to £7,500. But it ends in June. And these people are saying in the article that you could see, I think, how many million? I think 2.3 million self-employed people got into this program, but they fear that maybe half of them won't be able to cope if they don't keep that going.
Yeah.
So I didn't get it because I went into a webcast, live stream with HMRC, the IRS from the UK, and you only qualify if your business, your revenues dropped.
Yeah.
So I've actually gotten busier, so I couldn't qualify for it. So, but I don't care because I'd rather not be dependent on the state.
Right.
But,
Very true.
this is what's happening here, and the other thing as well, the program for furlough, which is for the people who are employed by employers, they're still getting 80% of their salary provided for by the government, but companies now are going to have to pitch in from August, and it's only going to end in October. So I think by the time we get to October, these companies they're just going to try to sack these employees, because there's no point in paying them if you're not going to keep them. I mean, I went into my local town here the other day, had to walk around. All the shops are closed. You know, how can things pick up again? Here in the UK, pubs are very important. You know, they've been closed for, you know, so I don't see things improving, except for the big companies like Amazon and the Walmarts, which here in the UK is called Asda. Walmart owns Asda. It's like a Walmart, but it's called Asda, and it's owned by Walmart. So I see those big companies continue to do well. Of course, Wall Street and the City of London are still doing well. They can trade from home. I guess they've got all the liquidity.
So here's the thing. So same similar situations as theirs here, but yet one of the biggest things here is that, you know, they can't take away those programs. So even though they're set to expire, so we have the CARES Act, which gave unemployed a lifeline, up an additional 13 weeks on top of the initial. Well, I think it's usually get 20 or 23 weeks on top of unemployment. But then on top of that, as for the entrepreneurs and whatnot, self-employed, they've also extended a lifeline to them as well. And it's set to expire in July. But yet, based upon the tit for tat between the left and right, the left have put out a very overly stimulating bill, which is called the HEROES Act. And so they're looking to try to move that forward. But yet, of course, the right is not satisfied with that. And so we got that going back and forth. But yet, because we're in a presidential year, Donald Trump cannot look as if he does not care. So that's why I'm more than confident saying that he's going to have to cave in, because if he tries to withdraw some of that or to eliminate any type of thing done from the left, it's going to look as a non-bipartisan type of ordeal. And then Joe Biden, who will definitely use that, sleepy Joe Biden will use that to his advantage, saying that Trump doesn't care about the American worker. We're trying to provide you an extra 600. So they're going to use that. So for those that are basically utilizing the lifeline offered by the government. And so on our end here, by me having to close one down of one of my little sports companies, I qualify. So I know that this is the end of how this all unwinds, because there'll be no undoing this. And so for me personally, I'm not really dependent upon it, but I'm actually not necessarily mad about it as well, because it provides a little opportunity for me to take those extra funds and do what I know best with them, which is to, as I always say on my channel, you know, get your weight up. But yet we're at a point now where, because of the presidential election season, they can't take away those things. So I'm beyond confident that they're going to offer more of that stuff. And then on top of that, it's all dangling a carrot in front of us while they make sure that the financial sector is well liquefied itself. So it's one of those things where they've already weaponized the dollar. Now they're going to go full steam ahead, because there are no other options. You kind of have to continue to do this if you want to make sure people don't wake up to the reality that we're on the last leg for this reserve currency status we have. So the Democrat plan, I think, is it 3 trillion they want to come up with? There's already 6 trillion that Trump has signed. 2.3, but he actually said no, it's actually 6 trillion. So that's 9 trillion it would be. And that's what we're being told. And so outside of what, the central bank Federal Reserve is doing with those nine windows, those nine lending facilities, like, what lending, we've witnessed what the word lending means, that there's no way of redoing or undoing those things. So outside of that, we don't really know. Apart from the stats we're being given right now, I think I just saw something about the Fed's balance sheet well above 7.25 now. And so people are saying
Yeah.
that it's going to be 10 by the end of this year. And my guess would be it's going to be 10 well before the end of this year, just because they're not going to be able to dial back. And as more of the news comes out of the damage done between the unemployed, the delinquencies, the commercial real estate that's about to implode, and all those products that I don't really know much about myself, as all that rears its head above water, who's going to come in? The Federal Reserve. So we're on a course to destruction, unfortunately. So my biggest concern is inflation. And so those that are on fixed income, like, we're about to really see some things probably before this year ends that will cause a lot of people to wake up and start to question what's going on.
Yeah, I've been talking a lot about inflation because people, they don't really know the real definition of inflation, which is the increase of money and credit.
Mm-hmm.
And then people say, oh, but there's no money velocity. But I've spoken to Bellin P. You've heard of Bellin P. He does some of it. And he was explaining to me that prior to QE in '08,
Mm-hmm.
the commercial banks didn't keep excess reserves with the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And then when QE started, you had these trillions of dollars that they actually put it back with the Fed.
Yeah.
And that counted as M2. And that's why the velocity, M2 velocity, is going down, only because, and now it's gone down again because the excess reserves are going up again because they're doing QE. But if you strip out the excess reserves, M2 money velocity should be really high velocity amongst real people in the real world. So I think people are missing out on that. The other thing as well, here in the UK, the Bank of England as well, we saw someone from the MPC, which is like the FOMC of the Bank of England. He just said, I think yesterday, we need another 100 billion in QE. So it looks like they already announced 200 billion in March. So it's another 100 billion probably coming in June. And they're even pushing, the bankers are pushing the governments to get into debt more. They think it's going to help things. And it's the other way around. We're going to end up, I think, like the 1970s on steroids, the stagflation. That's what I see.
Yeah, I can also see events like that occurring here because we have there's a big shift in, I guess, consumer sentiment right now. And so I saw some figures today saying that confidence is picking back up and people are spending again, but yet they're not spending their actual savings. They're taking a stimulus and they're spending that. So, I've seen all types of reports where people are buying TVs and all types of things like that, but that's not really beneficial for the economy in general. And so, as you mentioned, the money velocity is not there. And so people are really feeling a pinch and not wanting to spend what they've worked hard for, but they'll be more than willing to spend what they're given in the form of, as I say, universal basic allowance, was basically what it is. And so I think we're going to see a real spike in prices, as well as, depending on how they manipulate the figures and whatnot, when the Boost Act comes out. So the HEROES Act is just to get us through probably till fall. But between now and that time, I think they actually plan on announcing the Boost Act if it makes
Is that what's the Boost Act? Is that another one?
So the Boost Act is another one. So that's another, House-led objective, and I think it's been signed on by Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, a lot of the people who were presidential candidates prior to. It's basically the universal basic income, and so that's where they're talking about now. They threw out figures of $2,000 per adult up to. The initial numbers they threw out there was kind of ludicrous, but it's up to $10,000 a month if you qualify with all for your kids. So a household of 4 or 5 could get up to $10,000, and according to your income, wherever you're at, it goes down from there. But that's just another act that's sitting right now. I think the House they might be voting on it, or they put it to the side to see how the HEROES Act go. But they're all banking on this current pandemic to last to that 12 to 18 month time frame, which gives them time for the vaccination type of thing. So outside of the political figures and the central bankers now talking about we may not see the old normal until we can have confidence that this health situation is contained, i.e. vaccine. We're going to need to do more. And so this is where Jerome Powell mentioned that, monetarily, from a monetary policy standpoint, they're doing as much as they can to accommodate, but now it's time for the government to step up fiscally via Congress. And so these are their ways of basically pulling legislation out of the file cabinet. It was already, ready to go for this time frame, changing the wording on it, calling it the Boost Act, the Heroes Act, the whatever act. And those are things that they're sitting there now. They're telling the American public about it. So we're being conditioned to begin to expect help ongoing. And so that's what we're being told, while under the surface, only God knows the exact number that they're providing for the financial systems with all the other things we mentioned earlier. So that's what's on the forefront now. So between those two acts, President Trump cannot say no to both of them. Therefore, he will. And it's just a matter of how
say yes
much.
To one of them, I guess, maybe.
Exactly. And it's going to be a matter of, if we're able to reopen the way that they're anticipating by mid-July here, they would like to have majority of the pubs, bars, restaurants, gyms up and open, in hopes of them being able to, get back to whatever that norm is. But yet the transition right now, this is a great transition for all businesses to really assess where they're at, knowing that if they do not feel like they can get back to profitability, they're not going to begin bringing back. So therefore, automation is going to kick in. So I expect to hear more of how businesses will shift down on the actual need for actual workers and utilize technology. So I think a lot of things are going to be jam-packed in this summer. And by the end of the summer, if we are not operating even close to what we were prior to being shut down, there's no way of going back to opening things up heading into the fall and winter, when people usually decide to do all that traveling and whatnot, do vacations and cruise ships and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I also think you said that the Fed said that the politicians have to implement the fiscal stimulus, but I think the Fed, seeing that the QE now is open-ended, they'll have to step in as well, because I don't see the Chinese buying treasuries to finance all this. Right. So here in the UK, you hear more and more people being worried about all this fiscal largesse, probably because we're not the reserve currency. So they're getting concerned, but I think they're still going to keep, I think it's just talk to keep the markets calm. I think it's the same thing is going to happen here. And they're going to bring in robots, I guess. And the way they will justify if they bring in this universal basic income, they're going to say, well, the robots are working, so we can afford to pay people. But can you imagine real people who work and earn, let's say, less than 10,000, like you're saying that a family could get? How is that? How are those people going to feel? They're going to feel, well, is this money really worth anything if you can sit at home and people can get that for nothing? And that's when I think the inflation will start, because people are going to realize, wow, what is this they're paying me with?
Yeah, and that's already happening now. And so when the moment they announced that they were going to pay, I guess, or give out an additional $600 on top of the initial unemployment opportunities, that right there was the incentive to say, hey, because majority of the working class happen to be in the skill sector, where they're unskilled labor for the most part. And so we have all the small business owners that probably pay less than that. I think it's $10, $9 an hour, whatever minimum wage is here. And so they're already being compensated more. So there's already been more than enough stories that have come through this country saying that employers now are having problems calling people back because they make more sitting at home. And so that right there let me know that they were trying to basically disincentivize people from actually wanting to go back to work, so that it'll give them more opportunity to say that we have to support the American public. They're now in need of this additional funding. So that's why the HEROES Act is something that it will be adjusted. It may not be the $2,000 per person. They're talking about, right now I think it's $1,200 is the stimulus that was given, one-time stimulus it was supposed to last up to 8 weeks. So here we are now. We're at the end of the 8 weeks. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, was saying that 2 weeks ago he said that it's not time to do any additional stimulus. We're going to just hold off and wait. Then just I think 2 or 3 days ago, I read an article saying that I think about now it's time to talk about now the need to provide some relief for the American people. It's a short time frame. Something's changed to where they're concerned of that tit for tat, back and forth, left, right paradigm being disrupted. And on top of that, we have a lot of social unrest just from people, as I started to say it off, people have been pent up in the house. A, they're unemployed, and B, they're just angry because of the social injustice. So you got the recent death of George Floyd here, which is sparked a wave from coast to coast now. And I was always anticipating some type of trigger that would get people out in the streets. And of course, a lot of this has been spurred on by social media. And so I think we're being groomed for a definite disruption socially on top of the economic aspects as well as the political chaos. And that's why I'm not confident in November 3rd being a smooth presidential election, because we may not get there in a calm manner. So,
yeah, I watched your live stream, I think it was yesterday, about what's happening in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if they want people to go out and riot so that they can impose even more draconian measures, maybe. That could be the agenda.
And so the Minneapolis and the area where they're having the most issues happen to be President Trump tweeted on a moment ago saying that the mayor's a radical leftist and he's anti-Trump already. So I was watching last night live news feeds of where the police have been told to stand down. Apparently the National Guard was called, but they were not there last night. So there was buildings burning, apparently within a 10-block radius. And the guy was reporting on the street, and he was like, there's no law enforcement here. He's like, the people are running this city right now. And I'm thinking, like, that's not normal unless there was an agenda to really cause some political disruption so that Trump can now, as he mentioned, either the mayor gets it together or I'm going to send the National Guard there. So it looks like, once again, more tit for tat. So you got stuff like that where people are not concerned with the financial side. They're concerned with now looting and rioting and what can they get out of this. And imagine if the financial system goes down, credit market goes down, and there's actually something really to go out and share your displeasure with. Imagine what type of chaos we're going to have in this country here. So I think that's what they want. I really do believe that.
What about the Trump supporters, the Q crowd? Don't they realize that all the debt that the U.S. is incurring,
right?
President Trump is going right along with it. He said, I'm proud to sign this. It's got a T on it. I mean, if he didn't want, that's what I don't get. I was looking at the U.S. debt clock is saying now that the GDP is 21 trillion and the budget the debt to GDP is 122% after being at 106. And then in 2024, they're giving the GDP at 18 trillion, a drop of 3 trillion.
Really?
I mean, this is
So the QAnon crowd, I've never jumped on that bandwagon just because I never was sold, as I've mentioned before, that President Trump was going to be that guy that could run on his promise of making America great. Just because I could never define what great meant, in a grander scheme of things. And so, to my knowledge, there's still a small crowd out there saying that this is a part of a plan. And so, with Steve Mnuchin and Jerome Powell working closely together now, they're on cue now to bring both the Treasury and Fed under one window, and that they're going to roll out some type of the digital dollar is coming. It's going to be a part of the Boost Act that I mentioned is that the digital dollar is tagged along with that, to where they're going to roll out the new payment mechanism for citizens because it's faster and all those cryptocurrency type benefits apparently. But Steve,
is it going to go and they're going to back it by gold as well?
And that's what some people say on a global scale. It would have to be in order to compete with the digital yuan that's underway as well. So we got a long way before we get to that because we're witnessing a heist in between all of that. So while Wall Street's getting bailed out, the American people are being siphoned from, and in the middle, you're going to have people that are very angry to where there's nothing great about that. So I never bought into Trump being that guy that could to do the things he delivered, other than usher us into some new monetary paradigm, which it looks like they're on track to do. So I believe the timing is on cue for everything that the orchestrators of this would like to see. The biggest problem is majority of the world has no clue what's coming. And
Yeah.
outside of speculation, we don't know either.
Yeah, I mean, back in 2016 when Trump was campaigning, all the things he said sounded
Mhm,
really good.
mhm.
And then
Yeah,
little by little, he never did anything he said.
yeah.
And that's why it's very confusing because a lot of times he will say things that people like, but
Mhm.
he will only say it, he won't act.
Right.
So
Yeah. And
I think, yeah.
I'm sorry. There's been some outside of what he ran upon, draining the swamp, I guess was the biggest catalyst that got a lot of people fired up, regardless of political affiliations. And so there's been a lot of things done under the surface that never made it out to the mainstream news that you could say that he's trying or whatever. And so I don't know if that's enough, because I guess the biggest concern for majority of people that they're not even aware that it's of that much importance to them yet happens to be their financial matters. Like, by him calling for negative interest rates
Oh,
lets us know that right there doesn't line up for nobody. He's basically admitting the fact that he doesn't care about savers and investors. It's more so about whatever agenda he's ultimately looking to carry out. And that's the biggest concern, because reserve currency status, we've never been in a position we've been in before. And so that lets me know that the outcome will be something we've never witnessed as well. And it's going to be painful no matter what. And I think this next decade, unfortunately, it's going to be very uncomfortable, but yet we got technology that's plastered over it a lot, because you will never know that the figures are Great Depressionary plus some, but because of technology, we don't hear about the bread lines that are here, and all the things that was very common. It was 80 years ago, 90 years ago.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what great is.
Yeah, so to finish off here as well in the UK, we're starting to see some of the gilts, which are
Mhm.
the U.S. Treasuries, the government securities, up to like 3 or 4 years. We're starting to see negative yields on them.
Yeah.
So they're talking here as well. The Bank of England has said, well, it's not out of the question that will bring in negative rates, and the QE is going to keep going. So yeah, like you said, you try to get some more weight or keep
Mhm.
stacking. I think that's
Yeah.
if you're fortunate enough to have some extra savings,
Mhm.
or maybe even if you're going to get UBI,
Yeah.
if you're clever enough, or if you've been doing your homework, buy some gold and silver as well with that. I'm sure
While you still can.
I'm sure they won't be very impressed with you if you do that, because they want
Yeah,
you to
but
spend it.
I look at, we are spending it. It's just a matter of what we're spending it on. They want us to
Yeah,
go consume it for an unnecessities of our lives, but yet
yeah,
in a transition period that we're witnessing now, you need to preserve something for life after
the
all this
future.
chaos.
Yeah.
So, but hey, man, I guess that's the best thing we can do is stay prayed up, stay connected, and realize that there's opportunity amongst all this as
Of
well.
course,
So,
yeah, like the Chinese say. I know the Chinese are not very popular these days, but apparently in Chinese, crisis and opportunity are
mhm.
the same word. So,
Yes, it is.
Mike, thanks a lot for joining me. I think I'm going to be joining you tomorrow to have a chat with you, and I wish you a great weekend.
Thanks. Same here, my friends. Always, Mario. It's great to connect. Look forward to continue to do this and navigate these waters, and hopefully, wake up as many people as we can. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Take care.